Hey fans, this is Pat Combs, former Phillies left-handed pitcher, and you're listening to Sports and Rants.
And this is Sports and Rants with Brett and Pants. I'm your host, Brett Suter, along with my co-host, Glenn Pantalone. And we have a special guest in studio with us today, former Philadelphia Philly, Pat Combs. Pat, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. It's great to be in the studio with you guys.
And you just flew in from Texas. How's the flight?
I did, just for you guys. Really, it was great. No, it was fine. You know, it's DFW is not a long flight and easy to get in.
Temperature difference here?
Yeah, slightly. Yeah, yeah. It's good to be back in Philly in the summer here. It's I'll give up those Dallas summers for sure to be in Philly for a couple of days with you.
So we want to know: have you been keeping up with the baseball season so far?
You know, I have. Really enjoy watching games, and I've got 3 sons, so we catch quite a bit of action here when we can.
So which team is closest to you and where you live? Astros or the Rangers? Both teams are doing pretty well this season, so there must be a buzz down there in Texas.
It is. Again, you know, it's been a long time. The Rangers won the World Series a few years back, but the Astros have really struggled, so it's great to see both of them doing well. But we live close to the Dallas area, a little town called South Lake, and so the Texas Rangers now have become kind of our adopted team. We all grew up Houston Astros fans, so good to see the Stros back in it. Boy, they went through some real tough times here the last couple of years, and a huge turnaround, man. It's just that's fun to see in baseball. Now, with a team like the Astros, is it just the youth that you think is the reason that they turned it around so quickly, or is it good coaching? Or yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of variables when you look at a turnaround like that. And obviously there's great leadership. They went through a couple of manager changes, and so now to have a manager that they like that is relating well to the young players, I think is important. But you know, they're the talent level in the Astros organization for probably the previous 6 or 7 years was just a disaster. The minor league system, they had traded away, making that big playoff run that they had back in the early 2000s when they went to the World Series. They traded away a lot of the young talent. And when you do that, you sacrifice for a number of years now to rebuild that system to get new talent back up through the system, and they've done that. They made some great trades. They dumped some veteran players, got some good young players involved, but then you have to have guys that execute. And so now you're seeing a group of guys that have come together and have really executed the game well, and it's fun to watch. It really is. The pitching staff there was a huge turnaround story. So, but they've got it all put together right now. Now, a team that's now in that rebuilding phase is the Phillies, your former ball club. What are your thoughts on them, and have you had a chance to follow them at all this season? Yeah, you know, I look at the standings periodically, and it saddens me to see a great organization like the Phillies go through what they've been through. But it really, I mean, baseball cycles in and out like that, you know. So it's the way it goes. I mean, look where the Dodgers are now, and just a few years ago they weren't too hot either. So that's the way the game goes, and it's unfortunate. I think one of the better organizations I ever saw when I played were the Atlanta Braves, and they consistently produced winners because they drafted well, they developed well, and they got their guys up through the system to the big leagues. And that's a great encouragement. It's a great model because the younger guys see that, and there's motivation built within the system that if you play well, you get rewarded for it and you get moved up, rather than a team that consistently goes out and tries to trade for players and then it kind of backs up your minor league system. So for the Phillies now, you're right, it's a rebuilding time, but it's also a critical time now. If they draft well and they develop well, it won't take long. You know, they've still got a decent core group of guys, and they just got to fill in some gaps here. But I think next couple of years, it's going to be really critical that they've had good drafts here and developed their players. Now, when you joined the Phillies during your first few seasons, the Phillies were not the best team in the league. How is that coming into a team that may be struggling like the Phillies are now, bringing guys in and the guys on the lineup and the pitching staff? What were the feelings like when you played, and how can you relate to these guys now with the struggling team? Yeah, it's almost the exact same story that we talked about earlier with a team like the Phillies back in the early 80s who were World Series champs, and then they were in the playoff run almost every year for 4 or 5 years. They had a great group of veteran ball players. You know, you think about Steve Carlton and Larry Bowa and Mike Schmidt and Lazinski. I mean, those those are Hall of Fame names for the Phillies, and those guys produced at a high level for a long time. But then they were filling in those gaps, and they were trading away younger players. A lot of Phillies fans will never forget the Ryan Sandberg trade. Yeah. But that's what they were doing. They were trying to fill in the gaps with bringing in some veteran players in those playoff pushes. And so now, here we are. It just cycles in and out again. So now, the model has been set. I think if you look at the teams that consistently are middle of the pack or higher every year, there's a couple of common denominators. One is its leadership. They got a great GM. He knows what it takes to build a great culture and environment within the ball club. And then they have great scouts. And the scouts really are, I call them the blood system of your team. If you're not scouting well and you're not drafting well, boy, it really puts you behind the 8 ball. And you'll see teams that, when you look down their lineups and their rosters that are homegrown, and you'll see guys that were drafted 8th, 10th, 15th round. It's hard to find guys drafted 20th round beyond that. But you'll see some kind of diamonds in the rough there that are picks that really a lot of teams bypass those first 5 or 6 rounds. So I think that's going to be a critical thing for the Phillies is to rebuild from within.
That's something we like to bring up on this show. You played in college. You played college ball. Something we like to bring up is the debate whether players should come out of high school or college and what scouts' views should be on that. Do you have thoughts on that? Because we know you're a commentator for Fox Sports 1 and you do college games, and you get to see these college players every day play. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, another great question, because you think about and how the quality of a draft, and you just can't miss on players rounds 1 through 3. And the college players are much easier to scout and much easier to measure because they're 2, 3, 4 years beyond a high school player. So you're seeing guys with tools but have been developed over the last couple of 3 years. With a high school player, you've got to project it out, and that's the difficulty. Even with a guy like Bryce Harper or some of the young superstars, Mike Trout. I mean, everybody thought they had the tools, but until they get there and start executing and develop those tools, you really don't know if they're going to be a superstar type player. And there's so many variables that go into that. One of the big things with high school players too is just the mental, emotional side of the game. You've got undeveloped 18-year-olds. I know you guys are young, but you're a little bit more mature than most 18-year-old ball players. But when you look at an 18-year-old ball player, he's going away from home for the first time. He's going to be on the road playing baseball. There's all kinds of things that can come up in an 18-year-old's lifestyle. And so you don't know, even if he's got all the baseball tools and the talent, will he develop mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally to keep himself out of trouble and have a chance to get to the big league? So, yeah, just a lot more variables when you're looking at a high school player compared to a college player.
Do you find that the skill level at the AA is sort of similar in comparison to college, the more like Big Ten college baseball?
Yeah, I would say that the top probably 2 or 3 players on those big D1 schools, Big 10 schools, Big 12 schools, SEC, the great baseball schools that we see every year. The talent that those guys have, I think, is very comparable to AA. Pitchers especially. If you got a polished pitcher, he could go immediately into AA and compete pretty well. Hitters, it takes a little bit more of a transition just because they're going from the metal, the graphite bats to the wood bats. Now the bats in college are much more comparable to a wood bat. You don't have as big a sweet
bats
spot.
now.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, they've deadened the ball, they've deadened the bat, so now at least the scouts that are looking at college games can get a better idea of how a player can transition to wood than he did 10, 15 years ago. But there's still a transition there. So it's easier to look at the pitchers and kind of project them out to see if they can pitch single A, double A going in. Hitters usually typically want to start them at least single A. Let them get their feet wet and see some pitching that they maybe haven't seen on a consistent basis.
You were a former pitcher, and you grew up in the South, throwing all year round, I presume. What are your thoughts on that? These guys nowadays, especially pitchers, more injury prone as they get older, and it seems like their careers are cut even more short.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies out now, and Dr. James Andrews down in Birmingham has put out some great data for folks who are really interested in that topic. You can Google that and see some white papers produced on it. But yeah, it's a concern because now, compared to when I played, we would play 3 or 4 months out of the year and you shut it down. You'd go play another sport. And today it's different. These kids are playing year-round, and they're seeing a lot of stress injuries, and that's really the issue. When you don't shut your arm down from throwing, if you're throwing 12 months out of the year and you don't give your arm a rest, doesn't have time to properly rehabilitate. And there's a lot of tissues that are torn when you're pitching, and a lot of things that can happen, just like minor things, and your body needs to rehab that over the course of 2 or 3 months. And it's unfortunate that now you've got a generation of parents who think that their kids have to specialize in one sport and do it year-round, and they're really doing a disservice to their kids when they do that.
With you said you have sons. With them, did you let them play other sports all year round, or did they get to choose?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I never pushed my kids towards baseball, although they had a predisposition towards it, but I really wanted my guys to play different sports and to experience life in that way. I think it's especially for a good athlete, it's a shame he doesn't get to play other sports, because that's the other thing that we didn't talk about. But man, it just seems like everything is organized today. When I played ball, it was you go out in the street, we'd have a big street ball game, a wiffle ball game. Those are great. You get all the neighborhood kids out playing. And when my kids were young, I know you got
organized.
That's right. Yeah, you got to do some unorganized stuff. Just allow kids to have fun. And I made it a point, and I know you'll think this is crazy because I raised my kids in Texas and I'm from Texas, but we had the most awesome street hockey games ever in our neighborhood. So I'd get the kids out, we'd put our rollerblades on, and some of the kids didn't have blades. I'd go buy some blades and say, man, stick those on, let's learn how to play some street hockey, and just have fun, and that was always great. My oldest son ended up becoming a hockey player, but we just had fun playing, street ball and wiffle ball in the street with the kids. I just wanted them to have something unorganized where they could just enjoy the game.
Now the newspapers are coming out. Daily News said it. The next Pat Combs coming up for the Phillies. Aaron Nola recently started his major league career. Have you got a chance to watch him at all? Have you heard the stories about him? Came right from LSU, basically same jump as you did into the majors.
Yeah, I saw Aaron pitch in the College World Series a couple of years ago, and I was very impressed with his stuff. I thought he really was more of a polished college pitcher. He wasn't overpowering. But he had great stuff. And it was so funny because I had a couple of calls from some Philadelphia beat writers when he was making that jump a few weeks ago, and they were making those comparisons, and I didn't realize that I was he's the first guy to do that since me. And so it was kind of a neat story, but I think that's getting back to that point that we talked about. When you have a college pitcher who's had great college coaching, and you see the development in a guy like Aaron Nola, and his fastball's low 90s, 90, 93, but he's got great complementary stuff behind it, and he knows how to pitch. He knows how to pitch to corners. He knows how to set hitters up. I mean, that's the kind of development we talk about that gets a guy to the big leagues quick. So it was great to see he could do that, and I think the Phillies felt like mentally, he was ready for it, even though he didn't have that much time in the minors. I know my career path was just like that, and I think if you got a smart guy who understands what he's doing, you can make that jump.
And especially with Nola, we're seeing a lot more of those guys that are fireball type pitchers, throwing high 90s. Maybe sometimes touching 100, and Nola's out there using finesse and getting people out. What are your thoughts on that, and do you think we're going to see more pitchers moving towards the finesse instead of throwing so fast?
Yeah. I like to make the comment, one of the greatest things ever happened to baseball was the radar gun. One of the worst things ever happened to baseball was the radar gun. Because it was like these young pitchers today, man, it's really crazy to see the scouts out there, and every one of them have these radar guns. And I get it. You have to measure. You have to chart. You have to turn those cards in so the organization can see it on paper. But some of the better scouts I've ever talked to, they look at arm whip. They look at the type of intensity a player brings to the mound, the way he works out of situations when he's in trouble, how he keeps his head, his composure. I mean, all those variables really account for much more in creating a great pitcher. It's not just rearing back and letting the ball go. But I'll tell you what's crazy, too, today. You watch these guys coming up on these staffs in the big leagues, and there's 8 or 9 guys that throw 95. I mean, when I played, you might have had 1 or 2 guys that threw 95. Yeah. So I go back to the radar gun comment. When you've got scouts there that get the gun on you, I mean, you're thinking in the back of your mind as a pitcher, I got to light it up. I got to throw hard. And so now you're seeing guys that have better development with their arm speed, but they don't have pitch as well.
Yeah.
So that is
they miss their corners, and now you have guys walking 4 or 5 batters a game rather than before maybe 1 or 2.
That's right. And you think velocity really is the name of the game in pitching, and it's only a piece of it. And really it's a small piece because you get to the big leagues, every hitter can hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. And so you've got to know how to pitch. You got to know how to mix in your soft stuff. You got to know how to go to the corners, how to keep your composure, working out at tough situations. Those are really the things that make a complete pitcher.
The similarity that we're talking about between you and Nola is that you made the jump from being drafted to your major league debut within a year. What advice would you give Nola if you had a chance to speak to him, or if you already didn't have a chance to speak to Nola?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to speak to him. I don't think he needs much advice from me. He's done a pretty good job. He's been fun to watch, but if he were sitting here, I'd just say, hey, keep doing what you're doing and continue to learn the game. But obviously his stuff is good enough to be a big league pitcher. He's shown that already. Here, I just love watching pieces of that first start that he had, even though he lost that, on a crazy home run by a pitcher. But he's a polished young guy, and you can tell, you can see the confidence in his face and his body, and I think that's a huge asset for him. And so, like any young pitcher, he's going to stumble. He's going to run into some times where he loses 2 or 3, 4 games in a row, and you start to question, whether you're good enough or you should be there, or what's going on. And everybody goes through that. So I would just my advice for him is don't doubt. Just keep doing what you're doing. The same stuff that you've got now that's getting big league hitters out will be the same stuff you have 2, 3, 4 years from now that'll get big league hitters out. We all go through tough times and we make mistakes, and that's what big league hitters are paid to do, is hit those mistakes. So, but that's. From the standpoint of who he is and the kind of person he is, I think he's already proven himself up that he belongs here.
Now, like Aaron Nola, you came up with a struggling Phillies team, as we said before. What is that like, the pressure for especially a young kid coming up and being known as that number one guy in the Phillies organization?
As a first-round pick, too.
Yeah, those are great questions, guys, because you think you're getting back to the mental part of the game that a lot of folks overlook.
Like you were saying with the radar gun, I have to pitch 95. Like, were you thinking that when you were drafted, or any type of pressure?
Yeah, that you look at that and you think when you make that jump, anytime you go from like single A, double A, or double A to the biggest, whatever it is, that jump, you think I've got to be better. I've got to get these guys out with better stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing. You've really got to tell yourself and remind yourself that no, you don't. You just got to keep doing what you're doing. You've got the stuff to do it. What you've got to remember, though, is that the things that separate the good pitchers from the great pitchers are the guys that handle the mental parts of the game really well. And, I think back to my era, a pitcher like Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux threw mid-80s, if he threw that. But unbelievable movement on his ball. The guy could spot, could knock a dime off a glove, 9 out of 10 pitches. Those are the things that it takes to be a big league pitcher. You don't have to throw 95. And Nola, again, he's proven that. But I think that the key for him, though, is to know that right now, like you're talking about the rebuilding piece, he doesn't need to carry this team on his back. He's 1/5 of a rotation. He just needs to go out and do his job. And if he does that, and the Phillies begin to add more pieces to the pie, and especially to that pitching staff, they'll be fine. They'll turn it around, and Nola will be a big part of that, I think, in the next couple of years.
When did it become apparent to you that you were going to be a big league player? Was it coming out of high school, in college? Was there a coach that said to you that you had potential to be a big league player?
Yeah, I think we've all got those dreams as kids. We all want to see our face on a baseball card. But I think it becomes a reality when you've got it's not your dad or your mom telling you, or even your high school coach. And some high school coaches are good coaches and all that. But I think it's when scouts and college coaches begin to take notice of you, and then you start to feel like, okay, maybe this is a reality, and I can make it to the next level. But every next step is a huge step. And like I've got a couple of sons playing college ball, and they've realized that even going from a very strong high school in Texas and in strong summer leagues, they played on some of the best select teams in the country. Even that next step to a D3 or a D2 college level, much less a D1, it's a big step. The game speeds up. And the key to making those steps and being successful is to slow the game back down, which means you got to have experience, you got to face better players and face great competition, because that's when you realize once you can start competing at those higher levels, you feel like now you can play and you can execute and do the things to be a successful player. So yeah, it goes back to again, a lot of self-confidence to be able to make those jumps, but then just going out there and executing it. I've seen a lot of young players who looked like they had the tools. But they got to that next level, and it was the fear factor or something just overwhelmed them, and they just couldn't, acclimate to that next level.
At what point did you see the major league scouts at your games?
I saw scouts starting to show up probably my junior year in high school.
Wow.
And being a left-hander, I think, obviously helps. They all want to see lefties with good stuff. But between my junior and senior year, I picked up probably 4 or 5 miles an hour on my fastball. So I went from probably 82, 83 to upper 80s. And that's when I saw more scouts coming, and then they get you to fill out the cards, and they start talking to you. Hey, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to, you want to go to pro ball. And, for, again, a 17, 18-year-old kid getting asked those questions, that can be overwhelming. Like, well, I've always wanted to go to college, but, yeah, I want to play pro ball. I want to make it to the big leagues. And so then, you got to really think through that and get an understanding of which is the best path for you.
Now, you also had the opportunity to play for the Olympic team, correct? And you won a gold medal, correct?
Yeah, I was on the 88 team, yeah.
And what was that like, representing your country, playing in front of all those fans? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, that was, as I look back at my baseball career, that was probably the most unbelievable part of it. Just playing for my country. I'll never forget. In fact, Phillies fans remember a name, Tug McGraw. And Tug, we actually played up in the Philly area, just outside of here in 88, early on in our summer, as we were getting ready, preparing for the Olympics. And Tug came and spoke to a dinner deal. It was really early in the summer. But I'll never forget, it was a very stirring speech about what it means to be an American, what it means to put on the USA across your chest and to wear the red, white, and blue and to represent your country. And, I knew it was a big deal, but until Tug said those words, that was the night it really materialized for me, and it just hit me in the heart like, oh my gosh. This is not about me. It's not about, me playing from Texas. This is about I'm playing for my country. This is a huge deal. And I think all of us, our team, it was really a kind of a neat experience because we were all college players at the time. We had not yet started using the pro players, and there was just a great culture with that team, and we all came together. I think it was one of the very few teams that I felt like we all were playing for something much greater than ourselves.
In your opinion, as we all know, they recently disbanded the baseball in the Olympics a few years ago. Do you think they should bring it back, or do you think the World Baseball Classic does it justice?
I like the World Baseball Classic. I think they've done a great job with it. I would like to see baseball in the Olympics, especially now globally there's more countries playing baseball. Softball also got eliminated, which was sad too, because the U.S. just did really well in softball and always performed well with baseball. So that part was really sad. And I think, when it gets right down to it, now that we've seen in the past probably 5-6 years all that's happened with the Olympic Committee and the bribery and all the stuff that was going on with the financial aspect of it, you kind of figure out, okay, the Olympics now, you understand that there's a business behind it.
Yeah.
And from a business model standpoint, I can see why it was a loss leader. They weren't making much money on it. You're bringing 8 teams in, 25-man rosters with all the support staff. It's a huge expense to have baseball in the Olympics. But again, because it's a global sport, there's no country that dominates it anymore, and I think it's a great competitive type sport to have in the Olympics. I'd like to see it come back.
Why do you think that is? That we've seen so much development and talent all around the world now. Japan, even Europe is producing talented players that can play in the majors.
Yeah, it's been great to see. From a global perspective, because I think baseball is one of those games. There's so much strategy involved. There's so many different skill sets involved, and it's really difficult to find good baseball players. I did some international work after my career in baseball, and went over to Thailand and went over to Dominican Republic and other places where we were trying to develop more baseball talent. And you've really got to have an investment in the programs for it to take off. And I think we saw that. Major League Baseball has done a better job of investing in different places around the world. But then you started to see some college programs in various countries say, hey, we'd like to develop a baseball program here. So, again, it gets down to the investment dollar and what the MLB has done here. But I think they've done a great job of promoting baseball around the world and the development piece of it with various countries. It's been fun to watch.
Now, you keep bringing up the investments and this and that with financials. You want to tell our listeners what you're doing now so they understand the background of all this financial talk?
Yeah, you bet. Kind of a crazy day to be here with you because I was getting on the plane this morning. The markets were blowing up and had a bunch of phone calls and trying to get in touch with clients. But I'm a wealth manager. I got a team at Morgan Stanley. I've been doing it since 2005 and just love it. It's a great business. It's probably the closest thing I found to towing up the rubber and throwing a baseball here with just the dynamics of the markets and the changes every day, and just being on your toes and being sharp and understanding the technical aspects of it, but also the relational aspects. So it really is kind of a cool career path I've chosen, and I really enjoy it. But yeah, today's been a weird day, man. The markets have been really reacting negatively, and so we're we've got some great strategies in place to help us get out of the markets when we're supposed to. But yeah, pretty crazy day.
Now, one thing that we hear a lot is pro athletes going broke or athletes struggling with money, and here you are on the wealth management side, managing people's money all over the country. So what are your thoughts on that? And we hear, like, especially first-round draft picks, no matter what sport they play, going broke at such a young age.
Yeah, that's the sadder part of the stories of some of these players, and it's really a lot of it goes back to just lack of education. You get guys that come up that have never had money, families never had money, they don't know how to plan with it, they don't know how to invest it. So that was one of the chief motivators for me wanting to get into this business. I saw a lot of teammates that went bankrupt and went broke who had great storied careers, made a lot of money. Lenny Dykstra comes to mind, Darren Dalton, some great guys that just either got involved with poor advisors or did some things on their own that didn't work out financially. And look, what I found out with this business, most of those folks are good people. They just haven't been trained properly or haven't been introduced to the right advisors. And you've got folks out there, especially that are going after ball players that, for lack of better terminology, they're just snakes. They want to cozy up to a ball player. They know he's got a short window to make a bunch of money. If he makes a bunch of money and they can, help him manage it or mismanage it, then they can enrich themselves at the expense of the ball player. So that was one of the chief motivators for me wanting to do this business.
Do you have any clients that are athletes now, or do you just help out your friends that are former athletes?
Yeah, I do. I've got some athletes that are playing professionally, and a couple of them that are in the big leagues, a couple of them that are on their way to the big leagues. Been fun to watch their careers develop. This business is, for me, it's not just about managing their money. It's really kind of helping them manage their life and their lifestyles, and help them have better marriages. If you can help them take some of the financial pressures off, and it enriches their lives all around. That's my goal with these guys, and so that's been a lot of fun. I don't really try to specialize in working with ball players. We work with a lot of business leaders as well, but for the ball players, at least I've been in those shoes. I understand what it's like to get the big paychecks. I've also understood what it's like to lose some of that money, and the feelings it creates, and the damage it can do to your marriage and your life. So we try our best to help those guys plan and stick to a plan and manage the investments correctly.
Now, what's the difference between managing the money of an individual or an athlete that's going to be, no doubt about it, a guy that's going to play a long career, like a guy that sticks around long enough, and one of those guys that maybe be on the cusp of making it to the major leagues, maybe a 40-man roster in September type guy?
Right. That's a great question, because the lifespan of a pro athlete is very short. And like I was talking to one of our guys who's a high round draft pick this year, got his signing bonus. We just got it sent over to us, and I told him, hey, we're not going to invest it yet. We're going to see where these crazy markets finish out before we put anything in the stock market, which has been good to his benefit. But the same advice I told him. I said, hey, look, we're going to treat this like this is your last paycheck in baseball. He'll do something after baseball, but he's 18 years old. He just signed a nice major league contract, and he got a signing bonus. Whether he makes it to the big leagues or not, we don't know. So we're going to treat this $1 million sign bonus like it could be his last. And so I think that's the thing you have to look at as an athlete. You don't know when that could be your last paycheck from sports. And so the other thing is you try to help these guys prepare for life after ball. And that's not what they're thinking about when they're playing. They've got to be thinking about the game and how do they improve themselves on a day-to-day and a year-to-year basis to get to the big leagues and stay there and to get those bigger checks. But we always have to plan for what comes next, and a lot of those guys just don't even want to think about that. And I think that there's some danger in that as well.
Did you ever think you'd have this job while you were playing baseball, or at any point?
The job of financial advisor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really looked at this in college. When I was at Baylor, great school. They had a great business department. Really developed a relationship with the dean at the time, and he really mentored me and helped me to see past baseball. And he said, look, you got two things could happen. You could sign a big contract, you can make it to the big leagues, you can make all the money you ever need, and that's great. So learn some things here on how to manage it properly. or you don't. Maybe you get there and you make a little bit of money, and then you got to have a career after baseball. And so we're going to help you get prepared for that. And so he just said, look at different places in business that you think are interesting to you. I just kind of enjoyed the financial part of it and finance in general, investments in general, just because of the dynamics of it. And I just enjoyed looking at the markets every day. So that's where I just went to that path.
Your dean was your financial advisor in a way.
Yeah, for a short time there, he had never managed an athlete's money, but he was very helpful, and I think that's the great benefit of attending a college. You get to develop relationships with guys, hopefully, who have been there, done that, and now have a passion to teach it and help young people develop. And for me, Baylor was a great spot. Had some great mentors there.
Now, do you feel that athletes, ball players especially, feel more comfortable with you as a financial advisor because you played ball and you understand the aspect that it is a short career and that you now have a job after baseball? And do they look up to you for that, for advice for a career after they play?
Yeah, I think a lot of guys do, just the respect of the credibility of having been there, done that, walking in their shoes. Again, we talked about the emotional parts of this thing. It's I think there's a lot of great people who can counsel guys through different aspects of life. But until you've really been there and done that, and you've had that experience, you know what it feels like when you've pitched 3 or 4 bad games in a row and the fans in Philly are booing you. Not that they ever would, right? But I think that's just a part of how you learn, you develop, you grow, and I think it's kind of a cool thing to have somebody that's been around the game, understands that, and especially on the transition side. The hardest thing in baseball, no doubt, is making it to the big leagues. The second hardest thing is staying there. But I would say even harder than those two things is the transition away from the game. For a lot of these guys, we've been playing ball since we were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, right? And we've done it for 20 years, 25 years. Some guys, like Moyer, have been doing it for 40 years. But, there's that time when they're going to take the uniform off your back. Right. And then what does the rest of life have for you? And I was 30 years old when I left the game. And now I've stayed in it with being able to coach my sons and select baseball and be around the college game and be involved in broadcasting and things. So I've been blessed in that way. I've had a lot of great experiences beyond baseball. But for most guys, they don't have any idea what they're going to do after ball is over. And that transition out, tough on their life, it's tough on their marriage, it's tough on the lifestyle. I mean, there's just a bunch of things that change, and it happens really quick.
Now, you mentioned coaching and being an analyst. How is the game different from watching it from the sidelines, watching it as you're commentating, than when you were a player?
Man, that's a good question. I think that in youth ball especially, there's so much more pressure to perform. It's just crazy the amount of money that's going into youth sports now, and all the select ball activities, any sport now. I mean, the message is to our young people, especially even as young as 8, 9 years old. If you want to be great at something, you've got to specialize in it, and you've got to work at it, 24/7, or you're never going to make it. And I think that's a horrible message. And I don't know when it changed or how it changed. I think back to the interview I saw with Earl Woods, Tiger Woods' dad, and sticking the golf club in his hand at 3 years old. Well, that's an anomaly. I mean, that guy had unbelievable talent. He developed it, certainly, but I think that's been the major change that I've seen, is just the pressures on youth sports to perform at these high levels, and all the organization that goes on, all the hundreds of thousands of dollars that's getting poured into it. I think that's crazy. I always tell folks, look, if you've got talent, first of all, you got to have talent. You got to have some God-given abilities that you've been blessed with. There's no way I'm going to be a ballerina. I don't dance. I can't dance. My wife would love me to dance, but I just wasn't given those talents. And so you got to have the talent. You've got to be able to develop it. But most of all, you've got to have a passion for the game. And I see so many kids getting burnt out now because, man, it's a 24/7 thing, and it's just crazy. Some of these young kids that have the unbelievable talent, and they're just getting washed out at 15, 16 years old.
Now, before we wrap up the interview with you, we just want to take us back to your career and that moment stepping on the big league mound for the first time.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, probably the biggest moment of my life at that particular moment in time. And, it was I would say there was no greater feeling than having a lifelong dream and be able to fulfill it. I remember warming up in the bullpen, having the jitters and all that everybody said you would have. Of course, I always had them before I pitched, but just having my family there, knowing I was pitching in a big league park. But it was almost it was just surreal. It really was. And when I got on the mound, I remember hearing the anthem. I remember a couple of guys coming up and pat me and say, "Hey, go get them and just relax, have fun." But then when that first batter for the Pittsburgh Pirates stepped into the box, it was like everything just went blank. it was the weirdest feeling. And then all I could see was Dalton's fingers going down and me shaking my head and just making a pitch. So it was a weird feeling in that way, because then when I say go blank, it's like you don't hear anything. It's like you're just in this weird zone where you're all by yourself and there's nobody else out there with you.
Well, now, was that a whirlwind for you? You started out so hot. You went 4-0. What was the start of your career like? And going into the next season, did you feel pressure on yourself to keep performing well?
I'll get to the first part. The first part of the question in terms of getting there, the whirlwind, I wasn't supposed to be there. I got promoted from AA to AAA, and the pitching coach, the roving pitching instructor, George Culver, came in, had a meeting with me in the AA locker room and said, "Hey, we're going to make the move to pull you up to AAA, but it's only going to be to see where we start you out for next year, either AA or AAA. We just want to see how you handle AAA hitters." And I was kind of upset by that. I was like, man, I've had a good single-A, good AA season, and I wanted to get a shot to go up that year, even though I knew that was not the normal path to get called up your first year. But I kind of took it as a challenge to say, okay, well, let's go. My first AAA start was a 3-hitter. My second AAA start was a 1-hitter. I threw 2 shutouts in a row. And I guess that got the Phillies' attention, and they said, okay, we're at the point where the season was cashing in at that point. They finished last place by 25 games or so. And I think they just felt like, let's pull a few young guys up and see what they do. So, yeah, it was a whirlwind from that respect. Looking back on it in terms of was I prepared? I think I was prepared. I think the next season I went into it feeling like that September call-up was a key moment just for me to know I could pitch at that level. But I didn't put any added pressure or anything on my back. I knew the Phillies were rebuilding. But I just, every game, like any other athlete, you want to go out there and be at your best every game. And so going through that next year, which really was my rookie year, I got banged up and banged around a little bit, but I came in and finished the year strong. And so that's what you hope to do. You just hope to kind of build on those experiences.
Even with all that pressure, you probably would have to think to yourself, man, this is too easy in a way, from going through the minors in 1 year and winning your first 4 straight. Did you ever think of that to yourself?
I didn't, and I'll tell you, I was probably too arrogant and cocky to think that way. You got to have an edge about yourself, and I think sometimes as athletes we take it a little bit too far in terms of how we think about ourselves. But then you have some downturns in your career, and it wakes you up a little bit.
Right.
At that time, I was flying high. I came off the Olympic year. I flew through the minors. I mean, my confidence level was if you're measuring on a 1 to 10, it was at a 12. And so you almost start to get this feeling of invincibility. Like every time I walk out there, nobody can hit me. I'm gonna I have a chance to throw a no-hitter every game. And so that's why I say it's great to have that confidence and that edge about you, but then when it starts to go overboard, the game does a great job of humbling you and pulling you back in. And so that next year was kind of a humbling time for about 2 or 3 months there where I struggled. And but that's how the game goes. You got to have the edge, but you also have to be able to control that.
All right, Pat, before we let you go, I like to ask a question to former big league pitchers. What are your thoughts today on all these new statistics that they bring out to judge a pitcher? We recently saw Drew Hutchinson get sent down to the minors. He had 12 wins this season. I believe he was 12-6. Do you think you should focus on the wins, the ERA? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, statistics, you have to use them because they tell the story. There's an old quote. You can liars lie, but statistics tell the truth. I think that those they're useful. They're helpful. Some of the key statistics now that, of course, Billy Beane made it famous in Moneyball. The name of the game, really, when it gets right down to it, if you're a pitcher, is making quality pitches, getting guys out. If you do that consistently, you're going to do well. Every once in a while, you're going to give up the big hit, or have a couple of games where you give up, you just get crushed. the ability to bounce back and pitch well. I mean, that's just the mental makeup stuff we talked about earlier. But yeah, statistically, I think we can get caught up too much into that. I think it's useful, but again, when you're looking at a player, if he's 12-6 with a 5 ERA, okay, maybe the team's scoring a bunch of runs, they're winning, but that guy's winning. He's winning games. So does he need to work on getting his ERA down? Yeah, but you have to look deeper into that and say, okay, well, was it one bad game or 2 bad games? Maybe you gave up 10 runs one game. Well, that doesn't do well for your ERA. So I think you have to look beyond that. And so I do think statistics tell the story, but you have to look deeper than that on some of these guys and see what's going on underneath the hood.
Well, Pat, we thank you for joining us today. We appreciated your time. It was great having a former Philly in studio with us to talk about your career. Thank you.
Yeah. Enjoy your time in Philly and your business trip.
Well, guys, this was spectacular. The questions were some of the best I've ever had. So thank you for doing your homework, and really appreciate you having me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes our podcast of Sports and Rants with Brent and Pants. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Twitter @Sports and Rants. Like us on Facebook. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes. And visit our website, www.sportsandrantz.blogspot.com. It would help our rankings on iTunes if you rate and review our podcast. Thanks, and have a good day.